Late Night Thoughts, a special segment of the almost daily Zencast. Saturday, August 8th, a.m. In the year of our Lord, 2020. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to an almost forgotten segment of the show where I sit and talk to you about the weird shit I think about in the middle of the night, in hopes that as some form of thought-provoking entertainment, it might distract you from the madness that is reality we share all together as one on this little place, quote unquote, we call Earth. In truth, my friends, I feel silly sometimes stepping up to the platform, as it were, to speak my mind, because the world is literally in chaos, whether you believe it or not, and whose ever fault it is. So any attempt at entertainment seems, to some people's perspective, almost disrespectful, I suppose, offensive. But I do believe that the human mind needs to have different modalities of engaging with the ideas and the thoughts and the words and the multitude of opinions that are part of being a walking, talking, ambulatory, semi-autonomous movie camera for the divine light of consciousness, and or just the talking meat sack, if you insist. Either way, whether you're a materialist or a transcendentalist or any other sort of spiritualist or whatnot, we agree that the body has its needs, yes? And we address them in whatever ways we do, with whatever disciplines or lack thereof we may or may not have. But when it comes to plain old, regular, ordinary, run-of-the-mill human behavior and human processing, thoughtful processing, and the group project of consensus building, it's fair to say, without going off any radical limbs in either direction of the spectrum of possibility, that it's helpful to delve into entertainment type media, and I humbly beg to offer you, especially any that attempts to be thought-provoking and or informative and or questioning of things in whatever direction may have you. But to not cling, right? Don't cling to, you found this YouTube channel and it explained the world. No. And if you're going to go do research, for God's sakes, you better be deep in the stacks of some really large library with an actual library card in that building for days and weeks on end to actually begin to call it research. And I would beg to argue, if I may, not to be snobby, but for one individual to really say, I have researched with any kind of authority, you should at least have, tried to ask people out in the world directly involved with said issues. I, my friends, never pretend to use that word in such a way as to pretend that I know for sure with 100% clarity. In fact, I wrestle with doubt. Deep, serious, spine-crippling doubt. Most often and most peakedly moments before actually attempting to initiate the live broadcast / recording for posthumous consumption. That was the wrong word. Pardon me. Fear of death, anybody? Freudian slip anywhere? We'll talk about that later. And I think, if I may be so bold as to say, in that self-explanatory way, as I welcome you to tuning in to listening to tonight's episode, I venture to say that whatever I've said, if I express some level of confidence in it, I think it's because I've tried in my own way, not to research it, but to verify it to whatever limited scope I can, as a plain old run-of-the-mill, former sheeple turned curious, compulsive, obsessive reader of books, and truth seeker and spiritual enthusiast, spiritualism idea connoisseur, hobbyist at best. I do not pretend to have degrees in theology or any other such nonsense. I'm on the radio because I'm on the pretend radio. I'm on the playtime radio vis-a-vis the internet, fulfilling a childhood dream. To be on the radio for pretends, if not for realsies. Talking to you, whatever small but seemingly enduring collection of listeners, to share my sincere opinions. Not for you to take it at anything other than with a grain of salt and the obvious freedom of free will and free speech of your own to agree or disagree with. But hopefully, I beg, I plead to whatever divinities are the right divinities to plead for this sort of public discourse ritual that we enact when we listen to each other's ramblings on the internet, that people might attempt to tune in, thoughtfully consider, question, and contemplate, and not for next week, but over time continually. The show's been on the air for 3 years. I do say with some humble pride, if I can make that sandwich. Because I'm into co-creative oxymorons as opposed to absolutist, mutually exclusive, monolithic ideologues, right? Ideologues is the wrong word, but it's close. You get my drift. And so, I digress. I struggled with what to share about tonight, but I knew that I had to make the effort. And I also have been having weird, strange, deep, late night thoughts and bizarro dreams, which is something I have not yet published, but I am half-assedly, I think I missed this last pair, half-assedly trying to, instead of stumbling out of bed to go make coffee, take that moment to hit record first thing and just brain dump my dreams, because I couldn't write them down, right? The only thing that makes sense is audio recording, for me and my, whatever my neuroses are. And whatever my imaginary limits might be. Experimentally verified. I just can't read my own writing, folks. But that's a whole long other story and a shame-filled long chapter of my autobiography, which will be on another, excuse me, on another tangent of the show. Tonight I wish I had 2 cups of tea because I just drained this one and my throat is already cracking up. But some late night thoughts that have been troubling me, folks. So many. Because, I mean, where do you start? Where do you start with this comic book, cartoon, deep orange invasion of tyrannic... What did I call him earlier? I tried to write this down, but it was an inopportune moment to try to write something down. Tyrannicacosaurus Rex? Tyrannicak. I don't know if that's a typo or not. Osourus Rex, like king. And I think I meant to add another word or two to the label, but, and forgive me if that's name calling. That's an attempted comedy, folks. But the great orange king, because he has literally called himself the king, so I think it would not be... I would not stand up in court if anyone tried to sue me for calling him comedically a self-appointed king. And the absurdities that he's... Like, where does he have the energy to come up with all these things? And also, if I could hit pause for a minute on the whole world, or at least, maybe not the whole world. The whole world's got its own things going on. And if we might... I'm trying to see if I can get myself to remember to make this a tradition. Whatever segment, whatever silly placard I've titled the show, may I humbly invite you to briefly, before we go on with the tirade I was about to go on, if I don't forget it, take a moment to just breathe and acknowledge with a brief bit of silence for anyone and everyone that is suffering in any way, shape, or form. Because while many suffer worse than others in the hard, concrete sense of, object terms, and there's no argument there. There's people in the deepest, darkest pits of misery right now. And others suffer at other levels, and it's relative, and they may be silly by direct comparison, but nonetheless, suffering is experienced and pain is pain, especially those who are, afflicted with multiple onslaughts of different kinds of triggers for mental anguish on whatever level. Let us just take a moment and realize that's going on, and that you, my dear listener, yourself might be suffering with some trouble that is troubling you. And I want to honor that, even though you're listening to my show and I'm rambling at you about my opinions about stuff, because that's what I would do if I had a late night radio talk show segment on the radio. So join me for just a brief moment And just to honor that whole complex soup of troublesome pain and suffering that's going on in the world, for all the reasons, obvious and not so obvious. And in that moment of honoring it, saving space for it, it's not just about our own awareness, right? Like, it's about what energy we tune into, if you believe in that sort of thing. And even if you don't, because it works anyways, if you just think about the words I'm saying. I'm not trying to work some evil magic or nothing, at least I don't think so. But a moment of silence where we sincerely deep dive into ourselves and maybe just have to say, I honor that pain, or whatever. Use your own words, right? Like that lady yelling at those paramilitary pseudo soldier cops, ICE agents, whatever they really were, good old boys in camo, and not so much kidnapping, but definitely abducting a U.S. citizen who wasn't at the moment. Maybe he was pre-identified. I don't know, right? I don't know the identity of the individual who was absurdly wearing all black, which triggers many memories, but I'm not going to go into that spiral. I digress. When we take that deep inner moment, not to get all like yoga teachery about it, to honestly experiment with tapping into your latent empath. Because all that trending empath stuff on Instagram and shit and all the social medias, don't sue me, nobody. I'm not trolling anybody. I'm just saying I see trends. There's a lot of empath stuff, and there's all kinds of spirals of distraction there. But it's real. And we all have it. Everyone's an empath. And if you just honor that space of knowing that someone else is suffering, you don't have to like masturbate to it mentally. You don't have to, you don't have to go to the extreme. I don't think you have to go to the extreme of like self-flagellation, like the certain strict orders of certain so-and-so religions. But just make space for it in your mind and in your heart and in your energy and in your soul, if you believe in that. And if you don't believe in that, just in your consciousness, in the theater of your imagination, should that work for you. And I mean legit. Make space for it and welcome in some sense of empathy and sympathy and all the reaching out energetically that you could imagine or conceive of doing to the anonymous masses of whoever they are, including those in high status, as it were, because as dumb as it sounds, like, everybody, all souls are suffering, Let's not argue about labels. All souls are suffering. And if we go there and tune into it not in a judgmental way, not in a fearful way, not in a hateful way, not in an incriminational way, not in a play the judgment, pointy finger game kind of way, but in an honoring and making space for it. And acknowledging whatever, even if they're absurd and silly and post-third world cartoon coronavirus nonsense, things that are troubling you, or, if for whatever reason you're going through some insane, painful, real-life, hardcore shit, honor it, confront it, don't try to destroy it, and heal it. Heal it for yourself, and then in that healing, share it on the spiritual network. Because all souls are suffering, all souls are one, and connected, and individuated, and not individuated. Because, as not to ramble on too long before we take this moment of silence, but because as I was prompted to explain for myself to someone else, like duality, non-duality, they co-create each other. And so does all the polemics, right? Join me now, for reals, after a long rambling intro. Not to get into a downer, don't get all depressed and shit. Know that this is about tapping into that healing power that words can't explain all that well, because It's about love, and it's about transmission of energy, and it's about faith in the divinity that is the consciousness simultaneously perceiving and experiencing and creating the world around us. Namaste. The world's a mess, right? This is the craziest year. Is it the apocalypse? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I don't fear that. And if I'm wrong, I'll guess I'll deal with it. And if it's fucking hot pokers in the ass for eternity, fuck that noise. That's ridiculous. I don't think it is, though, because I don't know. I just the other day saw an apocalypse meme. Wasn't even a meme. It was a real life. I actually took the picture. It's not something someone made on a computer in any way, shape, or form. I took a photo of a real life billboard somewhere in the like northern deep suburbs of LA on the other side of the hill that I think LA doesn't even realize is out there. That's not quite some other city. I think it's still LA. I don't know. Some suburb thing of northern LA. I forget where I was. But I'd stopped to get gas. I look up and there's a billboard. Huge, as real life, predicting a day for the beginning of the apocalypse, whatever that meant. And I don't have it in front of me. I didn't know I was going to talk about it. Here we are. But it's literally there in my memories. And if I knew what year, I could probably pull it up really fast, but I don't remember what year. But I don't know if I saw it today or like 2.5 days ago, which means it might not still be in memories. And I'm not going to go clicking. But I pledge to you for real lifesies. I'm not making this up. It's not part of the fictionalization of my art project for insertion of this podcast into my literary magnus opus, which may or may never not be completed. But I look up and it's a billboard paid for by some church that has a radio station of their own, I believe. I could be wrong. Maybe it was just a radio show of their own. It said right there on the billboard the name of the thing and their show, and it was a date. And I believe it was not more than 4, 9, 8, 7, some range of months away. But clearly before the end of that year. And I was like, wow, that's bold. It's one thing to hint at it. It's one thing to talk about it in whatever church people are churching at. I respect that people are, lifetimes deep in being in church. And I've got a weird, nuanced opinion about organized religion. And trust me, it's the one place where I think people will first disagree with me on if it's their thing, and I'm saying because it's sort of like the one thing that I think is not an absolute, because God bless it, I don't believe in absolutes, but it's currently ubiquitous. But that's not what I want to talk about. Here we are, Saturday, August 8th. It's 12:45 in the morning, Pacific time. And the onslaught of unbelievable things that in any other decade going back at least 100 years. Well, maybe not so much because they were pretty outrageous back in the day, them presidents of the USA. But let's say in the last 60 years, even the last 80 years, any one of them would have gotten the president, if not kicked out of office by whatever legal means you kick a president out of office, but certainly, most certainly, like, never reelected again anywhere. And this guy's riding strong on whatever percentage points he's got of a base that's left. And he's getting away with things that are mind-boggling, absurd, and outrageous. From tinkering, like appointing like this sock puppet of a bazillionaire, well, I don't know if he's a bazillionaire, but he's certainly a wealthy person, into the post office, which I bet a lot of people don't care about USPS. But quite frankly, listen, every country has its mythos and its mythology, right? And as far as the grand old US of A goes, if there's one thing that's real and tangible and helpful and not seemingly overwrought with hideous corruption and nefarious political gain powered decisions, that was not the sentence I meant to say, but you get my drift. And that is an institution that is nonpartisan and totally, I think, generally speaking, fairly transparent and fair, and although sometimes a bit annoying or frustrating or whatever it is when it doesn't work or when it's flawed or when people abuse it, it is a pillar of the national experience in whatever way you want to label it. The American dream, the factual infrastructure of it, and it is one of the strongest pillars in terms of reliability and necessity, and God bless it, taken for granted. And mind you, I'm old enough to remember a phrase that ain't currently trending, but there's a real life reason why people said, it turned into a common shit talk thing people said in high school at one point, like household term, going postal, right? The people who work in the post office have been abused, neglected, and disabused and disenfranchised as the muscle, the meat and bones of a true pillar. Why am I talking about this in the middle of the night? Because that's just the tip of the iceberg of the absurdity of what's going on. That if you take a big couple steps back, like, come on, that is straight up how you write a cartoon villain dictatorship takeover of a country at the beginning of a dystopian superhero comic book. Like, the multitude of crazy, nonsensical things. I'm not even going to talk about this foil attempt at running for office. Although he talked about it forever ago. He predicted his own attempt. But I'm not even going to address it. It's the absurdest ingredient in the room. I see it for what it is. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, maybe I'll do a post about it tomorrow, because this is not Good Morning Triptopia. I'm talking about my deep personal thinkings about it, about all of it, the Michigas. I'm just pointing out some examples to the post office thing was like digs at me, because truly, as a young person, to be blunt, as a child in this country, it's one of the things that I was in awe of, because it truly magically worked. You could write a letter to someone very far away, and they would reliably get it in this little insecure flappy box in your front yard, or, whatever variation of a mail box, post office box you can imagine, but it would get there, and the person could read it, and it was a miracle of modern convenience. And truly, dare I borrow the phrase, one of the things that was exemplar of democratic freedom, that you could rely on that you could send an important package, that you could deliver urgently needed things to each other, right? In any way, shape, or form. A love letter, a care package, clothes, food, if not mistaken, pets, livestock. Not quite so critical sounding these days, especially for the urban cynics, but truly, life's anything, right? Medicine, your online shopping. For it to be so disabused generation after generation, to me as an adult, it really certainly does, to borrow that other phrase, that really chaps my hide. I mean, politics is politics. And even when they're playing mostly straight, there's a sort of baseline corruption you can kind of assume, because that system is ancient and it's inherently tied to that other thing that we talk about, that no one ever wants to take me seriously until it clicks for them and they see it in the world too. And then they're like, oh shit, you are right. And I'm not bragging, sorry, humble flex. But if there's one thing that even them woke young folk out there blathering on the medias about what is wrong with the world and that we just don't address, is that ultimately they profiteer on us from the cradle to the grave, and in all the ways that they can whip us into imaginary and or real reasons to be profiteered on. They capitalize on the real tragedies of our coping with all of us living on this thing we conveniently objectify, but is in fact a living set of systems of living systems, all of which it is, alive together. And we're toxic about it. Trump is the tip of the iceberg of a much deeper, much more profound problem, and arguing about him is absurd to me. But criticizing him openly as a free right speech of a member of this civic society, with that fundamental right asserted to me for surezies by multiple appropriate documents on all the necessary fronts, I'll do it, and I'll do it to the next guy or lady, especially if they do things that keep making me go, you're giving us a bone here or there, but you're still bending over backwards to make sure that other nonsense keeps happening over there, far away in the corner, with the organized butchering each other with bullets and fancy causes for profit. It just keeps going. But I digress. More importantly, not only does that keep going, not only are there many real pragmatic ways for us to do things about it, but on top of that, there's, I get it. You're going to tell me conspiracy this and conspiracy that. I know. I'm the guy that says psyops everywhere, yo. Like, I'm the guy that's like, life itself. Being live over there by yourself. Even if you never listened to my podcast, I assure you this was always true, whether you believe it or not. Being a human organism in this place we call reality is in and of itself a kind of psyop. A test within test within test within test of tests of how and when and where we manifest individually and collectively. And the one great horrifying thing that if I were, that saying about the greatest trick the devil ever pulled, well, if I were to say that there's something crazier than getting people to believe that he doesn't exist, which, he kind of sort of does, but he also isn't what the preacher is going to then fearmonger you about after saying that bit. Where's the note? And this is like the central hinge component. In the middle of the night, I'm obsessively compulsively like, if we could just do this instead of worry and argue and fight and blah, blah, blah. But everyone wants to argue and worry and fight. And, well, spiraling out of control here. Species-wide, third eye opening, transcendental enlightenment is our organic birthright. And this thing, for many reasons, and many other things, of course, too, are what the system of oppression are distracting us from with everything. In whatever ways it comes about. Real, not real. The way they emphasize this and de-emphasize that. And the way they bold-faced lie to you. And that's happening on so many levels that it's depressing. But also, my dear friends, as I may or may not have already rambled about before, we cannot fall for the trap of thinking monolithically and thinking that all of it is inherently evil and or out to kill us. It's so much more complicated than that. Now, coming from the bizarro, hippie, new age, nut job, cosmological model of the universe from which I, anchor my perspective on the world when I chat with you about it, I've got to say that I've got to point out that there's a sort of stumbling block that's become clear to me, and that's the notion of falling for I guess it would be a kind of form of bypassing, right? To think that you can only worry about all the highfalutin things that you think you understand about the universe and how it works, and you don't have to worry about the craziness like coronavirus. I'm like, well, okay. In the middle of the night, I doubt, right? And that's the scary part. I didn't want to come on this show because I wasn't sure if I was going to know what to ramble about, first of all. And I really almost didn't commit just now because I was worried. I wasn't sure how to really be upfront about the doubt part. But, in my dreams, when I wake up, some nights, not every night, and I don't live in fear, folks. I just crafted a fancy thing I wish I had in front of me about living in fear, but I don't have it, so fuck it. I don't think that I live in fear. I do contemplate things, and I do respect letting my mind wander and mull things over and process them because of all the reasons that I have metaphysically to consider that the organic process of the species processing all of this information, real or illusory or otherwise. There's a few things that I already know and believe in, sort of like how I used to know and believe in the post office before I knew how abused and neglected it was, and to what degree it's now being manipulated. But wait, about that, I wanted to hit on one point before I go off on this spiritual thing. That institution predates the Constitution itself. Fun fact, in case you didn't know. To fuck with it is sacrilege. If you're a statist or a non-statist sort of, believer in the Constitution, can there be such a thing? Is believing in the Constitution automatically statism? Which is something I technically stand as sort of like, we should just sort of stop doing that, you guys. We should stop being statists. I mean, do we need to organize? Absolutely. Do we need to create civic activity, etc.? For sure. But we're off on this other thing, and we're hating each other over it. And that, in and of itself, regardless of which party should or could or might be right, that is toxic. Not that there's an argument between the two parties or all the parties, but that they have distilled themselves to engines of anger and confrontational attitude. Like they all want to destroy each other, for crying out loud. The thing that the system of oppression is distracting us from, I humbly would propose to the world for public discourse and consideration, and I don't know, a slow coming around to, is this birthright, this organic birthright of enlightenment, which, and forgive me for sounding like a broken record, but I said it before and I'll say it again. Anybody claiming to be fully, completely, totally enlightened, transcended, awakened, has been sold a bill of goods and isn't. Because if you're still here in your meat suit, you can't evaporate into energy being state of mode and, activate your Merkaba and teleport through time and space and literally do that and then show up in my office so we can do a podcast together without driving a car, I mean literally, then you haven't unlocked the full unlocking of what those words mean in a manifest way, right? Have you had epiphanies? Have you had realizations? Have you had various veils removed from your eye? Of course. And here's what I'm trying to point out. I'm trying to judge anybody. I'm trying to say, my deep thoughts about this, I think, aren't important because I've said them, but rather because they might be helpful to the entire species. This revelation thing is a process, right? This enlightenment thing is an ongoing fractal unfolding. Why? Because everything's a fractal. And like I've said before, this place is not a place, it's a womb. And coming back to all this stuff, the way we treat each other is toxic. The way we think about each other is toxic. And it's not because of Donald Trump. He's a victim of it. It's not because of the lizard people. They were turned into lizard people by it. It's not because of the evil bankers. They're fucked up because of how toxic, spiritually, energetically, if you prefer, karmically, if you agree with that, all of it is. All of it has been. Even if we're doing our best. And that's simultaneously depressing, but also quite an interesting thing to wrap our brains around and then transform. Because that's the ongoing process. And there's always talk about light at the end of the tunnel. And I believe that there is always light at the end of the tunnel. And if there's an argument in spiritual terms, here's where I get to my spiritual point, right? And I'll stop rambling at you. If you're bypassing the dangers of the material realm, you could be endangering yourself unwarrantedly. Because while, yes, this thing that has been called a million names that we conveniently can also point to with the word reality, it is an illusion. The illusion is very real. And it has its consequences, its ramifications, and it plays by its own rules, which are, deep and complex, and of which I bet even the best of science, which is free of whatever corruption might make it objectionable, only comprehends a certain percentage of and no more. And that we have much to wrap our brains around. And focusing on that in and of itself is like the opposite of the toxicity. 444. And is that working in that direction, looking inward, doing things like making space and honoring those who are suffering, no matter who you are, no matter where you're at, no matter what level of relative, perceived, and or concrete suffering you're going through, make space to honor it. include that in your thinking when you're arguing with your family, arguing with your friends on the internet, right? And question this crazy idea. Because if it is, according to my quote-unquote research, that is our birthright. Everybody said, from Mithra to Yeshua, etc. And so that question always, when any variation of that question comes up, and if you've forgotten what question I'm referring to that triggered all this, it's the question of, what is the one thing you would want everyone to know is true? Or any variation of such sort of questiony prompts of like, what would you declare or ask of if you could package ideas in a question to a subset of people or to this individual or to yourself in the past, etc. That's like the one thing. I think that not because it's what's that word for a kill-all solution? And maybe I don't know that it's 100% true, but the puzzle pieces that I think are my understanding of reality as it actually works. And I mean in that I try my best to take reality on reality's terms to the best of my ability. And to the best of my ability, I also recognize that scope is quite limited, but also might have more bandwidth that I'm not accessing because the whole human species hasn't graduated together up through the ascension process as an ongoing function of our evolution here in this womb, this living being that is our mother. Somewhere on the internet today, by the way, or maybe yesterday, I read some meme that said, I think it was the 8 truths or the 8 rules of truth. And I don't remember what the rest of them were, but I knew that the first one sort of knocked me over because I had never seen anyone state this in this way so bluntly and claim it to be like a cosmic or universal truth. But that it said, oh man, I'm butchering it. I don't have it in front of me. But no one is real except mother. Is that that may or may not be very close to the actual phrasing. And I do not remember if I screen grabbed or saved or pinned or whatever that meme. But it was some person's 8 rules, and there was a little tiny portrait, but I didn't catch a name. And I was scrolling, and I stopped to look at that, and I went, what? No person is real but mother, or except mother, other than mother. Some phrasing like that, which I read as Mother Earth. I don't know if they meant some person or their own person, their own mother. Like no one else in the world is real to you except your own mother. Is that what they meant? Or that literally the only individual that is real is the cosmic mother, the womb of all life. That was what I saw, but I'm biased, right? I already think that. I mean, well, that's not true. Here's where it just sort of left me, it really stopped me in my internet tracks. I don't already think that so much as that I know that mother is real, right? I don't think that others are not real. And that's why I was like, what the fuck? Who is this guy? The rest of them I sort of agreed with. And I don't know how I feel about this claim that people at all, other than whoever wrote that, I guess, or somebody's got to be real for this to mean anything. Or does it? And it certainly challenges one of my pillars, which is that like duality and non-duality are not mutually exclusive. That means that like my flesh and bone, for as much as it is cosmically, physically, in the term, by that I mean physics, and mystically in terms of ancient mystics, everyone agrees that it basically is made up of absolutely nothing. Vibrating, wiggling somethingness is the closest you can get in like layman's terms today. I think, I would humbly propose, for the popular lexicon. That's the closest thing you can get to describing what, at the fundamental layer of reality, everything is, which includes all the flesh and bone that is made up of cells and other things and smaller things, and that even out of your body, like a certain percentage of the stuff in your body isn't even human cells, it's other things living in you and on you. And that's gross. But I try not to think about it too much. But it's also real, and it's beautiful, and it's mind-altering when you really sort of explore it. And why am I rambling about that? Because it's all something, like, ultimately, I humbly propose to you, or subject you to listening to, even though I said I would cut it off soon, is that there's a certain level of it, because of its recursive nature, this fractal theory of a living reality that is simultaneously the world I live in and the world you live in, and also my mind and your mind, and the objects in between those two extreme co-creative polemics, whatever word you want to apply to them, that there's enough content in there behind your personality that you can verify. And I've had enough of those that even when the doubt comes at me, I can just turn to fundamental, rudimentary, like, meditation practice, and I don't think I'm fooling myself, tune into that in a direct but sort of not hardcore way. And there's other evidences out there of, like, tools we could use to unlock those blinders, those filters that limit our perception and our comprehension and our scope of vision and our clarity of vision. And if we couple all the tools together and all the practices, focus on that shit, that stuff that's, according to all the crazy hippie new age nut jobs that were prophets, that all have a consistent story, aren't outliers. I tend to rule out the crazy outliers that are like, kill them all, let God decide. None of those theories work for me. But according to everybody from Yeshua to Mithras, Mithras, and everybody in between, the human species is meant to sort of evolve and elevate through a series of healing practices to abandon all the toxic things and stop living in toxic ways. They've always taught that, if you extrapolate the lessons and really, process them. And that we're, in theory, if I may nerd glasses up a bit more, have always been processing that very challenge, no matter what we're doing. Because the universe itself is sort of like a living fractal dreamscape for our experiencing. It's its own holodeck, but it's not fake. It's very real. And disease is real, and science is real, because it's, as Einstein, who clearly saw for himself certain things behind some of the veils of illusion, to understand what he predicted and wrote about mathematically and shaped mathematically, this illusion, as he called it, is persistent AF. And so, where am I going with that? We must be careful what we choose to focus on, right? And in the moments where we are filled with rage about a true injustice or an outrageous pseudo-injustice pitched to us or spoon-fed to us on the internet or whatever, we have to realize that part of the meta game, the psyop of psyops of life itself, the spiritual hurdles that we're hurdling through, involve all kinds of attempts, real and not real, pragmatic or hyperbolic, to enrage us, because that keeps us distracted. The whole aggressive conflict profiteering agenda is just a beautiful treadmill, a meat grinder in and of itself. And it harnesses our energies. And yes, there's all kinds of, you could say that there's like an energy warfare being welled, but also no, because we're not supposed to fight them, right? In truth, everyone that's ever pointed out to us, yo, humanity, slow the fuck down. We're doing it all wrong. Let's try this other stuff. It sounds wacky at first, but once you get down deep inside yourself and you see and you experience and you comprehend through direct phenomenological comprehension that life is life and is complicated in a way that we are only approaching a semblance of a description with the mystical stuff, right? And it's bigger and crazier and weirder than that. But there's meaning and there's truth in the fundamentals, and there's so much more important. Not because there's always this dystopic argument of dismissal. What are you gonna do? Hug your enemy to death? No. You're gonna superpower heal them into transformational healing. But we can't do that forcibly. It's got to be like this organic turning inwards to heal oneself. And that's why it works, because you're not forcing anything on anybody, right? And I don't mean like crazy impossible healing, because we're still here in this very real, very persistent reality where other life forms are out to destroy us. And there are consequences to hyper-politicizing and manipulatizing, weaponizing the occurrence of actual pandemic-level spread of disease that is new and not quite fully understood. Mother Nature is fully capable of creating those, right? And I'm coming back to points that are probably a bit cyclical and redundant to folks, but as I ponder the options, is it all a hoax? Is it Mother Nature trying to cull us? Is that displacement from Mother Nature, from Illuminati to Mother Nature? What is going on? What's really going on, and what's my role in it? There's no tea in that cup. No matter how much I wish for it now, friends, I cannot make a brand new hot cup of tea magically appear. No matter how many years of manifestation training that I may have bought on the internet I could or should or would not do, I don't think that that's going to be possible. Not yet. Not in the state we're in. Not in the middle of 2020. Unless somebody's already third eye pineal gland open and sticking out, protruding from your forehead, out there, hanging out, going, I don't know what's supposed to happen next, but sometimes this Merkaba thing shows up and stuff. I mean, if you're already out there stumbling around, activate the Merkaba and visualize a destination and teleport there. And then have someone confirm that through direct observation, and then teach people how to do it, because that's what we're supposed to do. And then that's just getting ready. That's not even the goal, right? Not to sound like, is that some sort of bypassing? No. But that process is qualitatively healing, arguably. And if we do graduate, right, from having figured our lessons out and liberated ourselves from this massive system of oppression by the humble act of remembering how to see the humanity and the divinity and the uniqueness and the value in all individuals, and hold each other accountable of some fundamental basic, truths and realities, instead of capitalizing on each other. And how do you get there, et cetera, et cetera? How do you build utopia when you're quite obviously slippery slope sliding into some absurdist real life expression of dystopia. And some days I go to sleep wondering if I'm, completely dead wrong, and that I should not be making assertions like that in public on a podcast, radio style talk show, opinion show. But here I am doing it for 60 minutes and 34 seconds because I hope that A, it's entertaining to people, B, it might inspire people to maybe join the movement of folks who think, well, if it is true, the only way we find out is if we all meditate together and encourage each other to sit down and deal with their inner demons and use, serious forgiveness, healing, meditation practices, etc., etc. It's all the madness, all the hippie new age. All I can tell you is that in my life, even when I was doing it wrong, by the way, by no means do I claim to be anything other than the person realizing these things. I have not manifested these things. My pineal gland is not poking out of my forehead, and I'm not claiming that it is. I do, in my literary fiction, write a character that may or may not have achieved that status, and it's part of the mystery of the storyline. But that's a different issue. Meta self-reference here, which I haven't written yet, but it'll find its way. In the end, friends, we can't live in fear, and we can't live in terrorizing those who we project are living in fear, because we are all mirrors for each other, first of all. And second of all, we are all capable of what those, supposed golden ones are capable of. In theory, we just need to do a lot of work, which we're severely neglecting and paying the consequences for. Right? It's amazing. Everything's a hoax. And some nights I stay up worrying about that. Hoax everything is the result of following any of the insert name of problem here is a hoax theories. Is that you quickly get to hoax everything. Even your own life. Like, are you Jim Carrey in that Jim Carrey movie where his whole life is actually a TV show and the place he lives at is not the real world? Allegorically, kinda, but not literally. No, I don't think so. Because otherwise, if that were so, then it'd be my life, not yours. Because I'm the one sitting here making a podcast. You're the ones listening, right? So we're both clear, because you can't be in that sort of fake-ass universe. Because I'm telling you right now, no one is paying me to tell you what I'm saying. So if you're listening to my podcast and you're tripping out on that question, am I in some sort of hidden camera reality show to lizard people, or insert your favorite potentially nefarious audience here? I don't think we are, because I'm not. I mean, I might be, but then I don't choose to believe that it could be really true. Tragically, I am a subscriber to the notion that in an infinite universe, all probabilities probably have been, will be, and ongoingly are true. But one must draw lines in the metaphorical, allegorical sand of the deep cosmos and say, not in this time frame, biatch. And that's the only place you can get hope. Where was I going with all of this? I don't know. We can live in misery, or we can heal. We can live in anger, or we can heal. We can live in fear, or we can heal. We can live in sheepleness, or we can heal. We can live in parrot peopleness, judging others, or we can heal. We can live in profiteering mode, or we can heal. Everything is like a thing we could be doing, or we could be busy healing. And that's not a judgment on anything. But all of those things can be set aside. including stuff that requires money because we made that up. It doesn't exist in nature. Nothing in nature charges anything else in nature except for being food. That's the only way. And of course, people have tried to like monetize, like make economic theories around the movements of animals because of food sources. But ultimately, when you really think about it, that's life consuming life because that's the only way to sustain life. It's a necessity. If we build weird behaviors around it, fine. Is that proof of economic reality in nature? I don't think so, because none of that has money, which is imaginary and which gets used in a discriminatory way in our crazy cartoon reality, that's abusive of other people when we could just be busy healing. And if the squeaky wheel gets the attention, I want to be the squeaky wheel about how we can all unite around that. There's no way, no matter where you come from, no matter what you believe in, no matter what you don't believe in, you can get behind a species-wide healing idea if it's absolutely just that, right? To like, let's just explore these crazy notions that have been taught to us throughout the millennia of how the species might heal itself, that we keep just sort of laughing and kicking to the side because money's more important. What? No. And I should stop rambling because I don't know how to wrap it up in terms of what to do about these late night thoughts. Except remain vigilant and explore meditation for yourself if you never have. And do more research. Here's the thing I'll close on. You can't just read the memes. You got to do the spiritual work. That applies for all memes, not just... I didn't mean that as a disclaimer for my own memes, because I don't even give instruction in any of my memes. I don't think that's my role, right? I'm just the scarecrow at the fork of the road. Go that way, please. Trust me, trust us. You want to go this way. But people have free will and they kind of do whatever they want. And by that way, I mean your own individual path of exploring your inner worlds behind the constructs of your many selves, to see if innate consciousness like reveals itself to you as a personality being in this monkey suit. And when it comes to those sorts of things, I think it is there in a way that you wouldn't need a politician to convince you of. You wouldn't need a scientist to convince you of. But it's weird and it requires hard work that I currently can't even claim to be really on fire succeeding at, right? I'm just trying to get my act together because I was nowhere near as prepared as I thought I could ever be about certain things. But I'll stop rambling at you, my dear friends and listeners. Thanks, as always, for tuning in. And have at it, friends. Go meditate for 90 days. Despite all the crazy bullshit going on in your world, whatever place you might be at, it can't hurt you. It might help you. Especially, let me tell you something. I've learned this the hard way. You can be in a stressful situation, and I know that there's many things that people might find stressful under all kinds of combination of circumstances, but I don't mean any disrespect, but it could be yours, it could be anybody else's. But even of intense high stress, meditation never made it worse, I don't think. Except for anybody who convinced themselves of their need to control their mind. Because it's not about that. Ultimately, right? It's anchored in forgiving the jabbering monkey and letting it just unwind itself until it's tired. And then healing it. Whatever that means. Because it's healing yourself, right? In a way that might actually help if it leads to all of us being able to see each other in that elevated way, in that enlightened way, in that woke as fuck way of we are all God, right? there's another meme to close out I saw. I think I reposted it, but maybe I didn't. But this one I think I did save or pin or screen grab or something. But it's a person on a cliff, and there's cartoon hands all around them that are big, giant, and kind of blank. And one is about to, like, pa-cha, flick them off the cliff. And another one is going to catch them way over there in the, before they fall into the deep ravine. And the other one is doing something else, but I don't remember what. And I loved this. There's like the word, like the label, this is God, or that is God, or this is God, and it's pointing at all the things in the picture. And somewhere in that, there's hope for transformation of the species. If we know that phenomenologically, is what I'm saying. Not if we convince each other of it ideologically. We have to go and experience it. And that means a lot of things, and it's hard to pin down. And I've already been rambling for way too long. So I'm going to leave you now, folks, to your late night thoughts. Your own questioning and seeking contemplation. And may it run you down the one and only rabbit hole I really, truly believe is worth running down to the bare bones bottom of it. And that's the rabbit hole in the center of your mind. Pain you're feeling now or have in the past, deep down inside, go know thyself before the history of your personality character you play in this womb-like space. Go deep down and find those wells of healing space that are the insides of your consciousness. Know thyself. Heal thyself. Through that, we will all heal each other. strong, my friends. It's a wild and wacky world out there, and we may or may not be directly invoking it. But one thing I know for sure is that, until we change, we will always have the hope of uniting, right? Like, that's what's going to invoke the change. So, don't lose hope. And may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart. Until next time, this is the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo signing off.